Hello, everybody. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. We're glad you've chosen to click in with us today. Logan, how are you, man?
Doing good, doing good. Getting prepared for opening weekend of baseball season. Heading down to Hattiesburg tomorrow. Going to be covering that series, and I guess you'll be kind of filling in Starkville this weekend. You'll be coming down and covering the men's basketball game on Saturday.
I will. I'll be there by myself, and always fun to visit Starkville. Not really excited about visiting for a 7:30 tip on a Saturday night, Logan. I was, would love to have seen like a 2 or 3 or something like that, but we'll go down and we'll catch up with the Bulldogs and Rebels, and we'll just see what type of Ole Miss team is going to show up. And we'll have more about that in a minute. Folks, before we move on, I want to remind you about the Memo, our news podcast. Be sure to check out that where you look for your podcast. And also Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs every Wednesday with Dalton Middleton and Brad Locke. So be sure to look for those podcasts. Logan, let's talk basketball a little bit. Really, the big news of the week was off the court instead of on when Andy Kennedy, the Ole Miss coach, announced on Monday his plans to resign at the end of the season. Of course, with each mounting loss, and there are 6 in a row now, there had been greater speculation, and it would only have grown about Andy's future. And while Ross Bjork and Andy Kennedy both appeared at the press conference, Ross talked about Andy waking up on Sunday morning after an 82-66 loss at LSU last Saturday with the decision that it was just time. Well, Andy used the words later in the press conference, writing on the wall and get out in front and own this situation. He did not want to be a divisive issue as the season went along. So anyway, I think Andy's take on there was a little more accurate. I think people could see the writing on the wall for this. Ross Bjork put this in motion a year ago when he chose not to extend Andy Kennedy's contract as coach. You know, the state allows that 4-year maximum, and keeping your coach at 4 years when everything is going well, it's just kind of given. It's just what you do. It sends a message when you go out recruiting that you have the full complement of years on your contract. But when you don't extend that contract, it just kind of sends a signal to the coach that we're not really happy where we are, and some things need to change. So everyone knew this was going to be a big year for Kennedy, including Kennedy himself. Well, in the meantime, with that set in motion a year ago, every time you would talk to Ross about basketball and ask a basketball question, we would hear Ross respond with the stated goals of the program. And the stated goals, stated by Ross, are that the basketball team wake up on Selection Sunday knowing that it is solidly in the NCAA tournament field, or that it is so embedded in the conversation that if just a couple of things turn the Rebels' way on Selection Sunday, that they would end up in the field. So when you kind of try to analyze that, Bjork is saying that every year he wants a team that is solidly in the tournament or is going to be a 1 or 2 seed in the NIT, with more emphasis on the NCAA tournament, of course. Well, when you look at those stated program goals, they really haven't been met since 2015. So we could all see that this was going to be a big year for Andy Kennedy, his 12th as coach. And it just did not get off to a good start and has not gotten better. There were those 3 home non-conference losses, one of them to Virginia Tech, an ACC team that's playing pretty well right now. But you just can't lose those games like to South Dakota State and Illinois State. And even though those are competitive teams at their level, you just don't lose those home games and set yourself up for the type of resume that you're going to need to get into postseason. Now, it was still very doable for Ole Miss once conference play started because the SEC numbers are better this year. There were opportunities to build a resume within the conference, and we've spoken about that on the program here. But that's not what happened. The three non-conference home losses were kind of a preview of what was to come. And in spite of 4 straight SEC home wins to start SEC season, this just has not been a very good road team. And, Logan, if there was a time on the calendar when I thought Ole Miss might turn the corner and had a chance to kind of get back and find itself and maybe make a little bit of a run at postseason, it was about a month ago, 3 weeks ago maybe, where they had back-to-back road games during the week at Texas A&M and at Arkansas. And they were in both games right down to the last possession or two, certainly the last possession, at Arkansas, where a potential game-winning three-pointer by Breein Tyree went in, circled around, and came out, which is kind of the story of the Rebel season. They lost both of those very close games. You come home where you had not lost a conference game yet, and you're playing Auburn, which, this year Auburn is the class of the league. They're going to be difficult to defeat, home or away. So, the Rebels came out inspired, but did not win. Then they go to Tennessee. They, again, they're on the road. I think the road became a mental hurdle for this team. They lost by 33 at Tennessee, the largest margin of defeat for Kennedy at Ole Miss. So anyway, the thing just kind of snowballed. It got out of control. And as Andy said on Monday, he's been unable to reach this team. Many times in his Ole Miss career, he's been able to get more with less. But that wasn't the case with this team. And when you looked at the roster at the beginning of the season, this really wasn't a less roster. There was a lot of excitement for the accumulation of backcourt talent on this team. They really thought with the addition of Memphis grad transfer Markel Crawford, plus DeAndre Burnett, Breein Tyree, and Terrence Davis all returning, in addition to freshman Devontae Shuler, they thought they had some guys among the guards who could really play. And we've seen flashes from all of those guys. Burnett has been the most consistent. But even Burnett is not the type of playmaker in a lead role that the Rebels have had at that position before, whether it was Marshall Henderson, Jarvis Summers, Stephon Moody. He hasn't been that kind of playmaker this season with the game on the line. He's been the Rebels' best scorer, and he's been very consistent with that. But DeAndre has not been quite the player that he was last season. He's dealt with the flu, a little bit of weakness a couple of weeks ago, but he's back from that. Not quite as good at the free throw line as he had been last year when he was around 89% up there. So anyway, what we've seen from the guards is that they just have not played very well together. We've not seen, we may see one or two have an above average game, but haven't seen 3 or 4 play well together. And that's what was going to happen to carry this team, which was replacing all SEC center Sebastian Saiz, and didn't really quite have the experience or talent to do that. So there have been troubles in the post, inconsistency in the post, although there have been flashes from junior college transfer Bruce Stevens. Again, the guard play, while solid in numbers, we just haven't seen these guys play well together enough very often. So anyway, in a nutshell, Kennedy said he hasn't been able to reach this team. And, as a result, he chose to go ahead and announce a resignation now. That was Andy Kennedy's decision. And I'll tell you this, Logan, the writing was on the wall. Kennedy mentioned it. We all knew it was headed that way. I had spoken earlier with Ross Bjork and asked him if he felt like he had to make a decision like that because, ADs won't be pinned down on that kind of question during the season, when there are still games to go. But if he felt like he was going to have to terminate Andy Kennedy, if that would happen during the year. And he said unequivocally, no, it would not. He said Kennedy deserves more than that. There are games to play. Well, the games will play out. But it was Andy Kennedy who went out on his terms as much as he could, given the fact that the decision was going to be taken away from him as to the go or stay decision, Kennedy decided, I'm not going to be a divisive point. I'm not going to let this drag on. Not going to answer repeatedly questions about your job status. You know how that goes, Logan. You get in a press conference like that, and the coach may have addressed this question 2 games ago, but there's always someone new at the press conference after a game who wasn't there, who feels like he needs to get that question on his camera, on his footage, or something like that. So that the question would linger the entire season, and that was something that Kennedy didn't want. Now, we thought that I thought that Ole Miss had a good chance after the resignation to win against Arkansas Tuesday night at home. They did not. They lost by 11. The reason I thought that was there's a chance this team comes out and plays with a little more chemistry and cohesion than we've seen. There's a chance that emotion comes into play and they get up and want to play for Andy Kennedy. But I think it went the other way. I think there was less chemistry and they just looked lost and could not hit shots. And Logan, that's an Arkansas team that's pretty good and is in position for an NCAA bid, but they're not outstanding. And it was a team that Ole Miss had many chances to defeat in Fayetteville, but did not. I thought, all things considered, that they'd have a shot to win Tuesday night. But as bad as Ole Miss was shooting in the first half, Arkansas was just as bad, and Ole Miss could not take advantage. Trailed by 11 at halftime, made a little bit of a run in the second half, and just could not get the defensive stops in that game. So it's a 6-game losing streak that Ole Miss carries to Mississippi State. Logan, tell us about the Bulldogs.
Well, the Bulldogs basically had their NCAA tournament bubble burst last night at Vanderbilt. Two road games that they've played since the last time we did the podcast. They went up to Missouri on Saturday, lost in overtime in that game, and that was just a really gut punch for this team because they were down by 12 with a minute and a half left to go in that game. They battled all the way back and tied it up. They scored 12 points, and I think it was a minute and 36 seconds. Tied the game. They sent it into overtime. They scored the first 5 points of the overtime. Missouri hits a big 3 right towards the end of the overtime. Mississippi State takes the ball out of bounds, gives it to Lamar Peters. He drives down, jumps up, knocks down the 3, and an offensive foul is called. If you watch the replay, I don't even think he made contact with the defender, but the defender flopped, and the referee was kind of out of position, called the offensive foul, and negated the 3-pointer, which would have won the game for Mississippi State. End up losing that game. And to make matters worse about that trip, Mississippi State couldn't fly out of Missouri that night. They couldn't fly to Missouri the next day. So they actually had to bus back to Starkville. I think it was a 9-hour trip that they had to bus back from Columbia, and they had to turn around, ride it back around, and get back on the road, drive to Nashville Wednesday night to play Vanderbilt. And, State came out playing very well from the gate. Yeah, they jumped out to an 8-point lead. And then it looked like things were going their way. And 3 straight turnovers. Vanderbilt started hitting some threes, took control of the game. And, it's just Vanderbilt just started knocking down everything from the perimeter. And they do that a lot in that gym. You've seen them over the years just in Memorial Gym. They just start knocking them down. And when they do that, it's hard to stop them. And Mississippi State stayed neck and neck with them. And it looked like they had the lead. Xavier Stapleton had a big second half, hit a chance to give Mississippi State a chance. He was fouled late. He hit 1 of 2 from the line. He missed the second one. Vanderbilt dribbles down. They get the ball to Riley LaChance. He hits a big 3-pointer to give Vanderbilt the win at the buzzer. So back-to-back road losses and a Vanderbilt team that just hasn't been very good this year. And Mississippi State's soft non-conference schedule that basically mathematically almost eliminates Mississippi State from any NCAA tournament contention this year. I guess they could still win the SEC tournament and get that automatic bid, but that's really about the only way they're going to make the big dance this year. They're still in contention for an NIT bid this year if they continue to at least win their home games and stuff, they should make the NIT. And even that is a step in the right direction for this program. They haven't made any type of postseason since 2012, since Rick Stansberry's last year. They made the NIT that year. They haven't made the NCAA tournament since 2009. So, but this team is improving. It's a better team than it was a year ago. They're actually headed in the right direction. I mean, they're a lot better than they have been over the last probably 5 years. So this is probably the best team State has put on the floor since that 2012 team. So, and they're trending upward. They're still young. So, we'll have to see, once they get those, 5-star recruit Reggie Perry, Robert Woodard from out of Columbus, get that new batch of recruits in here. And Howland has had some bad luck with some of the guys that he's signed. Malik Newman transfers to Kansas after 1 year. Mario Kegler transfers to Baylor after 1 year. And Garrison Brooks doesn't even make it to campus. He signs with Mississippi State, asks for his release, ends up starting at North Carolina this year. So those are 3 big players that he's had that has transferred out. And then Schneider Harrod regressed this year and ends up transferring mid-semester. So, he's had some bad luck with that. Haven't had all the horses to get out there and run, but they're still improving. They're still a pretty good basketball team that's trending upward. So we'll have to see how the rest of this season's going. But as far as the women's basketball team at Mississippi State, they're still rolling. I think they're 26-0 now, I believe it is. Ranked number 2 in the country. They're at Vanderbilt tonight as well. So and they can actually clinch a share of the SEC championship tonight. And if they win tonight, they get a chance to win the SEC outright Sunday here at home against Texas A&M. But tonight they can clinch a share of the title. That'll be their first ever SEC women's basketball championship. So that's quite an accomplishment there.
Well, Logan, I think the Ole Miss women's losing streak right now is 9 games. And I'll look that up later because I know people are really interested in that and want to know exactly what that losing streak is. But if it's 9, then that's 15 consecutive losses for the 2 Ole Miss basketball teams right now. So lots of things not going well on that front. It will be interesting to see what team shows up for Ole Miss against Mississippi State because, as you mentioned, while the NCAA is maybe off the table now, there's still a lot to play for the Bulldogs. Not to mention just a split in this rivalry for the year. And I just don't know that Ole Miss has the kids on the roster who are going to get up because it's Mississippi State. Maybe Terrence Davis. There's just not a lot of Mississippi kids like that. Brian Tyree usually plays well in this game. It'll be interesting to see what he does against the Bulldogs in Starkville. He was pivotal in that overtime last year as the Rebels took control, pulled away, and won the game. And he played well down the stretch again this season at the Pavilion when Ole Miss won that game. Logan, got something I want to bounce off you. How about this? Ole Miss coach Rick Stansberry. What do you think? How's that sound?
That would be very just the little pot shots that he took at Ole Miss during his time here in Starkville. It would be it'd be very interesting to see that. I know he liked to poke fun about his record against the Rebels during his time at Mississippi State. So that would be that'd be interesting to see. I do think Rick would be interested in having an SEC job again. I know he's back home at Western Kentucky and doing quite well up there. So, I think he would fit in, but it would just be very ironic if that's where he lands.
Logan, I know Rick as well. I don't think that loyalty to Mississippi State would be a reason that Rick Stansberry would not accept that job if it was offered. I think he would take the job. Now, personally, I think that several twists and turns would have to occur before they got to Rick Stansberry. I do think that they'll look other directions first, and it might be with another guy with Mississippi State ties there, Kermit Davis Jr., who is right up the road at Middle Tennessee State. Personally, and I had this in a column in the Daily Journal today, I think that's who they should go after. They should just take, just drive straight to Murfreesboro and say, what does it take? I mean, not only has Davis really gotten that program going. Now you look, he's been there about 15 years, And Middle Tennessee State was very patient with him because it was about the 10th year in. I don't know if it would be that kind of waiting, that kind of time, at Ole Miss if he were to take the job. But it was about 10 years in before the Blue Raiders had a 20-win season under Davis. But since then, they've only won fewer than 24 games one time in like the past 6 years. And they probably will reach 24 again this season. Last I looked at those Conference USA standings, Logan, Rick Stansbury, had made notable improvement with Western Kentucky this season. They were 9-9 in Conference USA last year, and this year they were like 10-2 and one game behind Middle Tennessee. I think those standings are still current. They were the last time I looked. But the Blue Raiders now, Middle is like 20-5, 11-1, and poised for another really good year. But I don't know if Stansbury gets in, if he finishes second in that league, second in the tournament. I don't know where our Conference USA stands. That could be a one-bid league, so we'll see. Rick Stansbury could become a candidate at Ole Miss. I think that Kermit Davis Jr. will become a candidate first. Certainly, there are a lot of other names out there as well, from Penny Hardaway, who's coaching high school ball in Memphis, to Steve Forbes at East Tennessee State. Lots of names out there right now. The Hardaway thing is interesting. He could bring a lot of Memphis recruiting contacts with him, and just that name, would draw some players. But you're taking a real risk there with the guy who has not coached at the college level. So we'll see. The search still in its very early stages. We'll see where it goes from here. But hey, it's possible. One other name I want to throw out there right now, Logan. Don't be surprised if Florida State assistant Stan Jones gets in the mix. He's another guy who hasn't been a head coach, but long time, very successful and respected assistant coach. Kind of like the coach in waiting there at Florida State, but he's still waiting. Been waiting a long time. He's a Jackson native. And just lots of experience there. He coached with Rick Stansbury in 2002. He actually was an important part of that staff that kind of launched Stansbury on that successful run at Mississippi State, that 2002 season where they won the SEC tournament. That was actually the last season that I was with State as a beat writer. So lots of names to consider. We'll see where the search goes. Baseball, Logan, you got a big series.
Yeah, and D1Baseball.com, I guess, has that as the opening weekend series to watch. It's the biggest opening weekend series in the country, and it's kind of interesting because Mississippi State was the team that ended Southern Miss's season in Hattiesburg last year, and we talked about a little bit about it last week about Scott Berry being thrown out at the end of that ball game. He'll have to serve a suspension Friday night for that ejection, but it's going to be a big series. I mean, Southern Miss has a lot of preseason hype surrounding them. Mississippi State has a little bit as well. So, it's going to be interesting. Mississippi State's going to go with Connor Pilkington on Friday night, Ethan Small on Saturday. And Ethan Small is a guy that hasn't pitched since his freshman season in 2016. He missed all of last year with Tommy John surgery. He's also another 6'4" left-handed pitcher, can run it up there in the mid-90s. He's kind of got the stuff that Pilkington does. And, so it'll be back-to-back 6'4" lefties going for Mississippi State on Friday and Saturday. And then they'll come back with a fifth-year senior in Jacob Billingsley, a right-hander, on Sunday. And Jacob Billingsley, the last time he pitched in Hattiesburg, he threw 9 innings, threw a complete game. I believe it was against Southern Miss. So he's going to get the call on Sunday. So that's going to be the rotation they're going to start off with. Mississippi State has a rough start. I mean, they got 16 away games to start the year. They won't actually play their first home game in the new Duty Noble Field until March the 6th. So they're going to have to go out on the road. And Andy Canizaro's got some shoulder pads he's had made up with spikes on them, like the Road Warriors wore in wrestling. And that's kind of going to be their mantra this year, is going to be the Road Warriors. And, they're going to head out to Texas for a couple of tournaments. They're going to spend a lot of time out on the road these first few weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. But this team has a pretty good, solid makeup now. They're missing some pieces, obviously, from a year ago. especially, you know, when you lose a Triple Crown winner in Brent Rooker at first base, Mississippi State might actually start 2 freshmen on its infield. So that's something to watch out for. They're going to move Luke Alexander from third base to shortstop. Hunter Stovall is going to be at second base. And like I said, could be a couple of newcomers there on the infield. Tanner Allen is a guy they like kind of to be their third baseman. And, you know, it's just going to be really interesting to see how they mix and match this whole thing, you know, as far as this team goes. But kind of the team's going to go, you know, they've got a guy at the top of the order, Jake Mangum, you know, obviously who won the SEC batting crown back in 2016 as a true freshman. He's going to be back at the top of that order, and he's going to kind of be the part that makes that whole engine move. And he can do so many things. He hits for average. He has speed. He plays incredible defense out there. He was hampered last year by a broken hand, and that's probably the only reason he's back this year. He was a draft eligible sophomore a year ago, and you know, he broke his hand, ended up hitting about 330, and that cost him to go in the later rounds. And he bypassed his chance to go pro last year to come back for his junior season this year. So, you know, State has some questions to be answered at the back end of that bullpen with Spencer Price already being out for the year, Mississippi State's closer from a year ago. So we'll figure it out, you know, as far as how they, you know, go with, you know, some of those roles in the back of the bullpen. But, you know, I'm interested to see how things go this weekend.
Ole Miss opens at home against Winthrop, Logan, and while there's a lot of attention on this pitching staff, they'll start with Ryan Rollison, the left-hander, on Friday, the number 11 overall prospect in the MLB draft, according to Baseball America, and lots of notoriety from other outlets as well. So he'll get the start, but you got to watch this offense. I'm curious to see if the offense is improved. The Rebels hit just 253 last year, last in the SEC. They're going to get a big test right out of the gate with Winthrop's, and I'm going to mess up this name. Okay, Nate Paulchek. All right, and with apologies to Mrs. Paulchek because I'm sure I messed up her son's name. All right, right out of the gate. This guy is the Big South Conference preseason pitcher of the year, led the conference in just numerous categories last year, including a sub-2 ERA and a sub-200 opponent's batting average. So big test for the Ole Miss offense out of the gate. And that's it for this edition of Double Coverage. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure to check out the Memo, our news podcast, and Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs. And Logan and I will be back with you next week for another round of Double Coverage.